All right, Jonathan, let's take a look at your essay. MLA format first. This needs to be Times New Roman, so make sure you fix that. English 12 is what class you're in. This is a space issue. Don't need a space here. This is straight up about the topic, so not a creative title. So you start your paper. So the tragedy of Macbeth, you would, if you're doing the full name like that, this has got to be capitalized. And you underline it, so that's important. But you're jumping right into the story, which I don't want you to do an attention getter. I want you to ease us into this story because you're basically just giving the whole plot of the story right off the bat. He was a Scottish Thane. You do have some huge capitalization issues in this paper. Duncan's not capitalized. There's another one down here that you didn't capitalize. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that proper names are capitalized. Anyways, he was unaware he had a depression. Because he had depression, he had symptoms like these things. Now, the only thing that should really come after this at this point is your thesis statement. And you got all of this right here. So you say his symptoms are insomnia, confusion, and emotional turmoil. And then another common sign is trouble sleeping, which this almost seems very out of place. It's almost like it should be in the insomnia paragraph. You can just like bring it down here. So fix that. Then you even have capitalization errors here with like of being capitalized when it doesn't need to. So I would move this whole little bit down to the insomnia. His symptoms led, LED, to bad decisions and choices the people of his kingdom did not agree with, causing his undoing. So I like the idea that all these things led to him make terrible decisions. Bad, I would say that you could use a much better word than that. And again, you could even be more, the people literally hated him at the end, so you could do something there too. All right, first body paragraph is about insomnia. Insomnia, comma, a common symptom of depression, comma, is spoken about in Act 3 when Macbeth says, so set that quote up a little bit better. So this is actually a really good quote. You got a space issue here. Really good quote. But then you don't talk about it anymore until down here. So I would bring that right up here and then move this up here. So just some organizational stuff set up with what this is about. Now, you obviously had to look this information up. You are missing a citation, so technically this is plagiarism, Jonathan, that we talked about. Even though you, I guess, kind of have a works cited page at the end here, this is still considered plagiarism. This is something literally in college that will get you kicked out. So anything that is not your own words, you have to cite where you got it from. So you say he's had a hard time sleeping because he's woken up by nightmares. Because of this, Macbeth would experience fatigue and impaired cognitive function. Again, I feel like you had to have got that from somewhere else. And then you talk about his judgments being altered, which is part of your thesis, which is good. You're tying the thesis back in. But that's all there is to it. You definitely need to add on to it. So what are you missing, Jonathan? We got to have a strong topic sentence. We got to talk about the actual symptoms and what they look like. We got to talk about what Macbeth does, and then we got to talk about what it means overall with this judgment choices that he's making and how that alters everything. So do that, and then you need a transition statement into the next one, which is about depression. So make sure you transition into it. So here is where you need to be careful. You're saying that depression is one of the symptoms of he has depression, like insomnia, confusion, and emotional turmoil. So this is technically about confusion, but you call it indecision, which I think is a little bit different, connotation to that word. So just be careful about what this paragraph is actually about, because then you're going to talk about manipulation, which I don't think is confusion or indecision at all. Manipulation is something totally different, although you say they use this as confusion against him. So just be clear in your topic sentence what we're really trying to get at here. Again, not capitalizing Duncan. you jump right into the quote, which is almost a little jarring. You say when he contemplates, she uses manipulation when he contemplates, but then your quote is his decision not to do it. So if you're going to use this quote, set it up as, Macbeth is stern when he makes this decision, when he proclaims that he will, quote, proceed no further in this business, end quote, space, period. And then talk about he decides not to kill Duncan, but Lady Macbeth would not stand for that decision. So reorganize this, reword this. And she calls him, quote, a coward in thine own esteem, end quote, and then period. So you're talking about, again, how she's changing his mind. But how is that? I mean, I still don't know if that's you're really leading us down into confusion, because then she quickly belittles him, calling him a coward, and Macbeth, not capitalized, changes his mind, being indecisive, led Macbeth down the path to become a murderer. So you're trying to tie it back into the thesis again, but it's just one sentence and it's not strong. And I don't know if your support in this paragraph really backs up what you're trying to say about confusion and being confused in the story. So think of some more support for that. And then again, transition statement into the next paragraph. All right, next we're going to talk about emotional turmoil. Throughout the play, Macbeth has emotional turmoil, and this is where you can get a better topic sentence, Jonathan. Not that just he deals with, but what does it do to him in the play? That would be what I'd want to see. Depression can be described as emotional roller coaster. Weather, wrong weather. That be guilt, frustration, regret, and sometimes completely devoid of emotional tone. So obviously that is from an outside source that you have not cited, so make sure you cite that. Good example as far as, he's apathetic, but again, you just got done talking about an emotional roller coaster too. So I like that he, devoid of emotional tone. This is a perfect example of him having that, no emotion whatsoever. So he's apathetic, so I would use like a colon there to introduce that quote. That needs to be a period. This needs to be cited. This needs to be a new paragraph. He brushes it off, saying she would have died at some point anyway. But then you don't elaborate on it. And then contrasting his state after he kills Duncan, he says, and then the quote, but this is actually Lady Macbeth saying this. You do bend your noble strength to think so brain sickly of things. So this is Lady Macbeth saying this at this point. So it's not, you aren't really setting up the quote correctly. Remember, the period goes on the outside of the parenthesis, not there. Didn't capitalize Lady Macbeth, so that's got to be capitalized. She describes it as foolish thinking, which I'm assuming you mean the death of Duncan. So you might want to be specific there. And then again, go back to why is this an example of being an emotional roller coaster? You got to keep diving into it. And then looking at it, this is a sorry site, so that's fine. No outside source though. So you got to cite that. He must face the choice he has made, which is fine, except this whole thing is about emotional turmoil and guilt and frustration and regret. And this is a perfect guilt and frustration thing, but you don't talk about it anymore. You don't dive into it. You don't elaborate on it, and that's something you need to do. All right, with your conclusion. All right, so your thesis kind of takes up two statements here, so you might want to rework that. And then you get into all of this, which actually you don't even bring up Banquo or Fleance in the story, in your essay. I don't think you do. So, or Macduff, actually, for that matter. So I don't even know why you're putting these in here. They have nothing to do with your paper. And you have capitalization errors here. Capitalization error there. This is not even talked about in your paper, so I put it in here now. His actions would not be the same if he were not depressed, so that's good. This is a run-on sentence. He would not have killed Duncan, no capitalization, starting this tragedy. If it weren't for depression, he would have been able to make the right choices, which, perhaps, okay. So obviously we're short, way short on page requirement. This is obviously not a works cited page, nor is it anything that would be helpful to you. So find some more reputable sources than that. Remember, you're supposed to find three different outside sources. One being your book, which you didn't cite at all either. All right, Jonathan, we got a lot of work to do, buddy. I know you put this off a long time, and we're either having a hard time going with it. Certainly not being at school doesn't help you at all either. So you definitely got to find time to rework this essay because it needs a lot of work. So hopefully we'll see a rewrite from you soon.